Before we move on to our next session, it is only appropriate that we thank our partners, our theme partner, WhatsApp, co-powered by Amazon, our spend management partner, Encash, in association with Perfios, our payments partner, Cash Free Payments, and our CEO's dinner partner, HSBC. We also like to thank our platinum partners, Google Pay, PhonePe, Visa, M2P Fintech, MasterCard, Falcon, and our registration partner, Entity Data Payment Services. We thank our partners for making this possible. Our next panel discussion is on the role of payments in scaling hyper-growth digital businesses. And the moderator for this session is Mr. Pramod Mulani, who is the Vice President Card Strategy at JUSPAY. May I request Pramod to be on stage, please? Thank you, Pramod, for joining us this morning. Joining Pramod on the panel discussion will be Manoj Varma, Payments Head, Lyra Network India. Welcome, Manoj. We also have with us this morning Rishi Batra, the co-founder and CEO of TWID. Welcome, Rishi. Joining them on stage is also Shinjini Kumar, who's the co-founder of Salt, mysaltapp. And lastly, we also have with us Ramakrishnan Gopalan, who's the Vice President and Head of Products, INSA Visa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I give it off to Pramod Mulani now.
Hey, thank you. Can I request all of you to just move ahead? It at least looks very crowded from here.
I like backbenchers anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah, I do. I still see some last benches. Can I request you to come front, please? We'll feel good. Okay, I'll start. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for making it to this session. This is Pramod here, and I'm stepping in for my colleague Ishan, who is stuck on the Eastern Express Highway for some variety of reasons. So pardon me that he couldn't make it, but let me try and see if I can get the best out of this panel. Let me start by the first question, right? And more from JUSPAY's side as well, and we can start by anyone trying to answer this question. A lot of things are happening in the startup world, and many of them go through the journey of, a seed round, angel investors, to actually going to Series A to Series C, and as JUSPAY, we've seen that cycle, right? How does the payment ecosystem actually help these fintechs grow? I think that's a very, very important question. Because when fintechs get into this business, obviously they don't understand regulation, they don't understand this. All they are in for is solving the customer problem. And all of you have seen and work with big companies. So this would be an area of interest for fintechs for sure. So
fintechs have actually has come into the play only because of, 3 and 4 pillars actually. One is, in India, we have digital businesses coming up. Why and how digital businesses coming up? Because, consumers have become digital. Digital consumers, digital businesses, mobile internet, and payment tech. So these are the 4 pillars of this entire, growth and evolution of fintechs in the country today. This is what we see. And so when when internet is growing, digital business is growing, consumers are growing, and Then when digital business are growing, they also need the infra to accept payments, which also needs to be digital. So in earlier days, we had seen, payment was a big problem. And so Paytm innovated this, the Flipkart innovated, COD, cash on delivery. And, there was some, more acceptance and, people started buying products. But then that had its own limitation. But after, since last 3-4 years, we have seen, especially after Demon, and after COVID and all, consumers are very happy with, digital, and they are very aware of digital acceptance. And people have started using digital payment as an option, aggressively, and awareness is also there. So these 4 pillars are actually together, working together. And everybody needs to grow. So, internet penetration needs to grow, digital businesses needs to grow, and the payment tech companies also needs to increase their infra, to accept and enable these companies, to process huge volumes. So, we have seen even JUSPAY is trying to do the same thing. They are creating products and platforms for, high growth, hyper businesses. Similarly, Lyra as a company, we also, this is our core focus. We try to, do a lot of things on the infra side. We are, always trying to increase our infra capability to support the ever-growing digital businesses in the country. Yeah.
If I can add as a consumer, one of the remarkable phases that all of us have lived through recently is the first lockdown of COVID, right? Because it was so extreme and it disrupted all supply chains of every type. And one of the interesting things that happened was that a lot of local supply chains suddenly emerged, right? So suddenly in your building, some woman was making, paneer and supplying to everybody. People started to do, and I'm giving examples of women because around that time we started the idea of building salt, right? And we were doing interviews with women to understand how does money work in their lives. And one of the things we realized that for a lot of women, businesses are very small, at least when they start. The idea is not to, not to build a company. The idea is to make something, make consumers, solve for problems in their own supply chain, and only after that they start to think about how do they pay their suppliers or how do they take money from their from people to whom they sell. And one of the wonderful things that happened in the COVID time is that a lot of these small entrepreneurs, many of them women, but many of them also men, like we suddenly had breads being baked locally and supplied to homes. We had dosa batters being made and supplied to homes. Like, between 3 complexes, you have 1,500 apartments, so you can suddenly have a market there. And the most wonderful thing and most gratifying thing to see in that was how quickly the payment problem got solved. So nobody, and it was all remote, right? So nobody really needed to rely on, people were just dropping boxes at the doorsteps and getting the money. And that, I think, was revolutionary in the way that it made people understand, because even in a normal situation, you can send your goods with anybody because the goods get delivered and that is trustworthy. But getting somebody to collect cash or COD, like you just talked about, is never the optimum solution. So I think for businesses, as they grow from being P2P, so in the beginning, everybody takes money on their own, Google Pay or Paytm or whatever, but very quickly they moved from there to setting up their, you guys provided, and there was such wonderful integration of, these PGs at that point of time. So I think that is, I'm talking at the lower end of the value chain, but it's been quite amazing to watch.
I've been a personal beneficiary of some of those self-help clubs that have emerged in the market, right? I think if I were to look at it, from a startup perspective, and even if they're getting bootstrapped, I see 3 large needs for a startup, right? First is assist them to scale in the market. I think that's their number one help that somebody can do. The second thing that we can help them with is give them a path to maneuver the regulations and the complexities and the compliances. And the third one is more emotional, is about give them a shoulder to lend. Just give them a shoulder and tell them, hey, if you want to do something, here we are, right? So if there is a new startup that's emerging and is looking to solve for payments, whether it's a COVID group which has popped up, or it's post-COVID recovery group which is emerging as it speaks now. Visa works with a lot of players like yourselves, Pramod, JUSPAY, PAs who we bring in and we help them to get them on board. I think that's something that, a lot of the big networks and big companies have done, is they've created this ecosystem where who can be the first point of contact for a lot of these small startups. So I think that's point number one. Point number two is as they grow from a startup to a funded organization to an enterprise, I think we allow them the path to scale. We give them the assistance, right? So as you acquire more and more customers, we think about your customers, right? We have a developer portal called VDP, where we have more than 90 odd APIs, where you can come and take care of your customer problems, and we have an API for it, right? We work with Neo, which is a fintech. One of the problems they came to us is saying, my customers are traveling abroad. Please let them know what's the cross-border FX rate that you're going to serve on a daily basis. So we built a very small API, very small connectivity that opens up in the app, says, hey, okay, you're going to transact. This is your dollar rate for today, right? Small problems, transaction controls. A lot of kids these days are getting credit cards and debit cards and prepaid cards. Parents like myself, who has a teenage daughter, are worried about where is this money going to be spent on, right? So putting controls there, making them be on control of things, I think is some of these things that we can do. So basically think about their customers, what are their problems that they're going to go through, and solve for them, co-create solutions with them. And lastly, if possible, as they grow, maybe, be one of those investors in those companies and go and put in the money so that you show that you mean what you say, which is you don't just build solution, but you also invest money in these companies so that they can grow. I mean, we made a lot of investments in this market. We hope to make more. And that's something that's dear to Visa's heart. So really glad, we are kind of building on. One can build infrastructure. Shinjini can talk about the bonding and the creation that happens. Hopefully we'll solve for the payments problem in that.
I heard the accelerator program is also good, right?
That's right, thank you.
No, I think I'll just take this question up from a startup perspective, right? And Pramod, great question. If you look at it from what we're trying to build in terms of rewards, we had a belief that rewards have changed the digital payment ecosystem, not only the country, but the world. We were living in a cash economy moved to plastic economy thanks to Visas and Masters and now rupees of the world. And that is moving towards the app economy as well, which is Paytm, GPays, and Visa is doing quite a lot there as well. All has been backed by rewards, right? Majority of the reasons, you look at airlines, you look at credit cards, debit cards, the ecosystem has been built towards rewards. So that was the hypothesis that we started a business, can we make it sexier, right? As simple as that. And the overall piece that we went through the startup was that yes, raise the seed money, super difficult, lucky to have Sequoia and be next part of the world. There's a concept called as PMF, product market fit. Do that. Are you able to do this with variety amount of reasons? And then you realize once you're about to achieve that, there are regulations as well, which is the question of Pramod. Having said that, I think we were lucky. We were working with quite a few, the larger of the banks, the larger of the ecosystem, and we could scale the PMF, we could scale the pieces of the, all the hurdles that came around on the, of the pieces, and yeah, I think scaling very well. The important piece and the important question when we look at any of the digital business and hyper growth piece, which is the topic, is that how are we solving the problem? And she's mentioned exactly how they solved the problem of the small entrepreneur and how payments helped in terms of developing that. And all of us on the panel are there for that piece.
So thank you all of you. And I heard regulation cut across all of this. So the follow-up question is more around regulation. And obviously in India, payments has gone leaps and bounds and 6 billion UPI transactions, and I'm quite sure cards are also growing multifold. The question is that there are so many new regulations that come in. In fact, we keep joking every Friday there has to be a circular, otherwise that weekend is not complete. Friday release. Friday releases. So
earlier it was a movie release on Friday, now there is a RBI circular release on Friday.
Yeah. As we heard the governor speak, obviously it's in the right intent and spirit. What we want to understand, Ramki, is, and maybe Shinjini, you've got a full background to this. How can, some of these players like Visa play a very important role in ensuring that, things like tokenization, subscriptions, which are so important from a customer security and growth point of view, what is a role that, networks like Visa can play in helping the ecosystem comply? Because end of it, it's all about ensuring that we protect the customer and give them the right experience as well.
I think think we play multiple roles here. One is ab initio with the regulators. We do have very open rounds of discussions. I keep saying this. I joke this to my team. Our biggest client is our regulator, right? It's not the banks, it's not the fintechs, it's not the payment processors, it's the regulator. So I think open discussion with the regulator to understand what's there in our mind and help them navigate through that. I think one way to work with them is to work through these vision documents that come with the regulator, where you know clearly where you're headed and hence prepare yourself. Like, one of the things that regulator has put out for the 2025 vision document is on cross-border two-factor authentication, right? That looks quite challenging. But if you think, without a deadline in mind, I think there are solutions in place. And there are a lot of, device-based authentications that we can do to enable some of that. So one is work with the regulator. I think the second thing is, work with the ecosystem. Yes, tokenization is a complex animal. India, as we speak, is perhaps the second or the third most token penetrated market in the world because of the sheer scale of digital payments. So it's kudos to the regulator to think one step ahead. 10 years back when two-factor authentication came into the market, tell me everybody would have felt that, wow, that's super friction. But as we navigated those 10 years, in hindsight, that looks like a fantastic decision made by the regulator. So some of these decisions will be evaluated over long term, right? We shouldn't be thinking what's going to be the impact that it's going to create in the short term. There's going to be a disruption for sure. So what we do there is work with the ecosystem, players like yourself who are certified to be a token requester on behalf of Visa, so that the small mom and pop store need not bother about tokenization. For them, they have to think about their customer. They don't have to think about data leaks. They don't have to think about what happens when things go wrong. At least, somebody is protecting them. So it's working with the regulator, working with the ecosystem. And at some point of time, if you've been in the banking industry and if you earned your gray hairs in the banking industry, you'll know regulation is reality, right? So you're not going to shy away from it. You're just going to, take it in your chin and hopefully be more proactive about it than just being reactive. It's a continuous learning that every organization has to go through. But be it challenges in subscription, which you alluded to promote, or be it challenges in EMIs, offers, I think there are solutions. It's about having those honest conversations with RBI, and we meet them quite often to say, sir, this is going to take time, especially guest checkout. It's going to take some time. I think having those hard, honest conversations with regulator, making sure that everybody around is equipped to deal with it, is one way of managing through it, is what I feel.
So, if I can just add to that, I see a very young audience, so I will just share that I worked at the RBI for 17 years, right in the beginning of my career. And I think people don't understand why regulators do the kind of things that they do. And part of it is because a lot of the external help that you try to get around regulation comes from lawyers or the legal system. But actually there's a big difference in the way the legal system is set up and the way regulators are set up. And I realized this when I left RBI and I started to engage with legal teams and compliance teams of banks and other organizations. And legal team tended to have more clout because they were full of very, highly paid lawyers. But the complication that happens is because you have to understand that law is based on principles, and those principles are almost permanent. So if somebody wrote in the constitution that all humans are equal, you are not going to just wake up one morning and change your mind because markets got disrupted or COVID happened. All humans will still be equal. And so legal, interpretations will follow from there. Whereas, and everybody will come from that same place, whether it is a lower court or is supposed to come from the same place, whether it is a lower court or a higher court or a legal person sitting in any organization. Regulation, on the other hand, is almost always responsive to conditions of the macroeconomy and conditions of the economy and whatever sector they may be regulating. So what ends up happening is that something which looks okay to you at a certain level of threshold suddenly doesn't look okay to you at a different level of threshold. And then you come back and you say, oh, but this was always there. Why are these guys changing their mind? They're not changing their mind. They've understood the risk and they are managing the risk. So their job at a macro level is to manage the risk in the economy and in the ecosystem. And those risks can be of different type, and I'm not going into that. But I think it is important for us as industry participants to anticipate some of that risk. Because it's not that we don't understand it. That's the other thing that really I found very amusing when I walked out of RBI, because when we were in RBI, we used to think हम तो कहीं गांव से पढ़ के, exam pass करके bureaucrat बन के आ गए, और industry में you meet people, कोई Harvard से पढ़ के आ रहा है, कोई Stanford से पढ़ के आ रहा है, तो you assume that these are very smart people. But these very smart people, why is it that they are not able to see something so simple and basic as this? They are able to see, but they have legal departments that tell them this is okay, this is technically correct. They have compliance departments that have read a circular and certified that this reads like this and therefore you can do it like this. And as I have grown in the industry, I've realized this very interesting phenomena, and I'm just sharing this with you because a lot of young people that now work in companies don't get groomed to understand this very important part. And the day that it hits you, whether you set up your own startup or whether you work in a startup, the day it hits you, and in banks it doesn't happen so much because from the beginning people are, मतलब वो घिस-घिस के उनको बता दिया जाता है कि if you make a mistake, if you missell, you will get a point docked and your bonus will not happen. So whether they like it or not, they learn it. But for this ecosystem, I don't see that happening. And I'm not a conservative person at all. I'm a very big risk taker. That's why I'm an entrepreneur at 50. But I definitely think people need to understand that regulations are dynamic. Regulators manage risk at a macro level, and you are not important to them. Whether you are too big or too small, if you're causing that risk, you will get under that.
I think great point, Shinjini, and I think talking about the digital businesses as well, and as a founder, the key challenge that I face is we've hired a few super brilliant product managers.
फिर वो रोज बैठ के आर्ग्यू करेंगे, मेरे साथ भी करते हैं।
स्टैनफोर्ड के
मेरी co-founder स्टैनफोर्ड की है।
So the conversation happened day before, and he said, "Sir, let's do this, but I'm not sure about the compliance." I said, "Compliance is a job, right?"
We'll see it later. We'll see it later.
He came back and asked me how am I supposed to do business. I said, compliance is a job, but business is a responsibility. So as a founder, as a person who leads a digital business, it comes from inside that we have to make our employees and our people compliant, right? Regulator, what is coming around. Of course, we can't track the Friday releases. It becomes difficult for us, but I think we have to look at growth, we look at charters, we look at numbers, we look at various things after PMF has been done, the growth trajectory, but that has been imbibed and grown that, okay, the compliance is first, right? And growing business is your responsibility. But just my 2 cents on this particular
If I can add one small point. I think compliance should be by design. It should not be a byproduct of the business model. I think that's a very important point that startups need to realize. Banks always do this, but they dial up to the other side. That's a challenge. That's a different discussion, perhaps a topic for another discussion. But if you don't do compliance by design, and if the business model is predicated on arbitrage, I think it'll get caught out at some point. I think that's the question. If you stress test your business model on a compliance chain, and if you think as a business you're protected by it, I think those startups are expected to outperform. They don't do stress testing on regulatory arbitrage, is my simple learning from this.
And I think I echo it. So we were just closing this round, and one of the investors actually came back to us that you need this license. There was a conversation that started happening between the lawyers. There were 14 from them, 6 from our side. And finally, all of them concluded, okay, we do not need this particular license, which was a relief, but we anyway applied for it, right? That, okay, if someone is asking a question, let's be compliant first. Let's not be in eyes that we've not done it. But yeah, I completely agree. It has to be with design, and then of course the other pieces are coming up with the responsibility.
So my view is that in present time we have seen multiple regulations for multiple fintech industries. So when we say fintech, fintechs are categorized into multiple segments. And every fintech has different type of regulations now. And a regulation on one segment is actually impacting the other segment. So there is a conversion that is happening. But it is very confusing also, and there are too many regulations also, and this is also creating a lot of problem. So maybe we need another startup only to address the and educate on the the compliance and the regulation that is coming up and evolving, and how do we see and how do we adapt to that situation. But to me, the regulator, is only worried when, you reach a scale, So they are allowing, and as a startup, we should also think of, innovation, then compliance at an early stage. During the early stages, let's create the product, let us see how it works in the market. And once you think of, growth and scaling up, that time you have to, fix the compliance thing. Even when you see, views that RBI is trying to take, card storage. Card storage was okay all these years, for everybody. But now only it's a problem, and RBI says, the merchants and the acquiring entities should not store the card information, right? Why now? Because the scale is so huge that now RBI says that risk has increased in the entire ecosystem. So now I want to take a protective stand. But all these years, it was all okay, and there was, light regulation was there, and it was managed. So when RBI sees scale, they're trying to take, different type of steps. Similarly, if you see, we have just got the PA license, 3-4 weeks back. So all these years, since last 10 years, there was a model that was existing. You create a nodal account. There was indirect regulation was there, and businesses were flourishing. There were many paytech companies, payment solutions company, and everybody was trying to work. But now, if you after demon and after COVID and all, scale has increased so huge that risk in the entire ecosystem has increased. So RBI has decided, boss, I want to directly regulate. So it has become difficult. So now the direct regulation has come, and few entities have got in principal license, more people will get. So this is my view from the regulator's side. They are allowing us to innovate, at a smaller scale. But as you grow big, you have to follow rules of the land. This is what I see. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. From the heavy duty regulation to more interesting and sexier topics of customer experience. I think Rishi, maybe I'll start with you. How much is customer experience important in the digital businesses and the consumers for today?
I would say paramount, right? After compliance though, right? Now, assume the way the journeys are moving on startups. We get grocery deliveries in 10 minutes. Why would payments should be taking time? Why would any of those things in terms of selecting the product to the checkouts, selecting what you want and actually getting the product delivered, it should be like this, right? The AI models, the ML models have been focusing towards that, how we can predict Rishi much better, right? There has to be a lot and a large play of data elements that we have to look together. And this can be done by an ecosystem. Selling data, getting data, monetizing data, even making sense of data in India at this point in time has been a myth. Can it be done? Perhaps the ecosystem has to work towards it. There are supports available from Visa in terms of the APIs that can be done, which are available globally, not in India, right? So can you extend some of those pieces in India here as well, which makes activation, for example, possible here in India. A lot of the companies are doing very well in abroad. But I think if you look at it from the overall customer journey, the personalization attributes, and personalization involves what UI, UX that you bring, the rewards attributes so that the customer LTV is higher, right? Is paramount that the person has to do. People have been getting into cashbacks and various discounting, and our prediction is that those models will go away. The long-term models of sustainability of engagement, rewarding for a customer LTV will actually sustain and go forward as we move along with the picture, right? Just 2 cents on this.
Ram, do you want to talk about, we've seen Visa build products like Visa Safe Click and some of those experiences. You want to throw some light on that?
Yeah, nobody can overemphasize the importance of customer, right? It's perhaps the only reason why we're existing. One of the learnings that I personally see as having come back to India after a decade is, while digital payments have got scale, what I think we need to go inside one level and see how simple it is, to do this. If perhaps the only other market which I see of similar scale is China, where this has happened in the past. Maybe they got a head start 3-4 years before, but both the markets I see that there is an absolute unilateral attention on customers, and that's what's got both these markets here. Yeah, so from a Visa standpoint, while our model is a B2B2C model, which means we work with the institution, not necessarily institutions' clients, it's in our DNA to look at those customers. So one of the products that you mentioned, Pramod, is on Visa Safe Click. It's essentially about a one-click experience on checkout where you can just check out. Authentication happens by design. You know, it's not something that the customer needs to be aware of. It's not something that the customer has to do. But given the fact that the customer logs in from a device and the device leaves a footprint, can we use the device to do an authentication? And that becomes the sole factor to determine if this transaction can go through. You don't need an OTP, which, you know, 10 years back it was great, but 10 years later, probably there are other ways to do it. So I think for us, it's very important. You know, focus on customer only comes from culture in the organization to me. You know, at the end of the day, if you get your people to train to think about solving problems rather than launching products, I think you will be able to win that battle. I think for me, it's all about customers and teams. You know, Jack Ma says that you hire a person who's absolutely different than you. So you need to have people in your teams. You know, Shinjini spoke about somebody a little while earlier who I believe challenges her quite a bit. You know, that's great. You know, that's the kind of people we need in our team so that we have diverse perspectives in the organization, and that helps you make sure that customer is kept center of everything, right? Whether it's compliance, whether it's costs, you know, the C that's more important is the C of customer, right? So long as you keep that in mind, business models will be sane enough.
Yeah, I think just a follow-up piece after hearing what Ramki said. I think if you look at our business is very similar to Visa. They're in credit, debit, we're in rewards, right? We provide that kind of network. And I think for us, we don't own the customer like them. It is super difficult for aligning the teams that you have to think customer first, right? That is the engagement attribute that you want to, and of course then working with the partners, then creating a network. And if you go through the flows, you'll realize that checkbox, move out after 2FA, right? When the compliance is done. So when you do that, when users get habitual towards those particular pieces, and that's where you realize the companies have been successful. But again, customer first, and we don't own it. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to add something slightly, tangential to this, but important. Because what we are building, for example, is in the space of financial services. And we are building a fintech platform, and we want to reverse the gender ratio on our fintech platform. We want 80% women, because on normal finance, there are 80% men, okay? So same products, similar products, but so to your question, how does customer experience play into that story? It's because my customer is different. My customer is somebody who has access to money, who manages money all the time. Whether it's my money, household money, legacy money, but they manage the money. So they manage cash flows, but they don't create assets for themselves. The asset creation goes to men. If they do create assets, it's gold or a house at best, very different from having capital. So it prevents them from becoming entrepreneurs. It sometimes becomes a friction in their life, etc., etc. Now, the reason I'm going into this is because then when you think of customer experience, there is a lot of theology around customer experience, right? That things should be simple, things should be easy to understand, it should be one-click checkout. Those are established theologies of experience. But what do you do when you are going into a customer segment that is different, right? So theory. So then you build a customer experience idea. So obviously we went in, we did 500 interviews, etc., etc. But the important thing I'm trying to say here is this. When it comes to money, when it comes to finance, when it comes to payments, it's easy, right? I give you money, doesn't matter which it's easy, because it doesn't matter which platform we used, you got the money instantly, right? I gave you money, you got the money, you thought, oh, Paytm is great because I send money to Shinjini and she gets it instantly. When you take money from somebody and that person is going to take the money after 5 years and only then know whether the money actually became more or even remained safe, that level of trust building takes a very, very long time. Now, banks, so this is the main point that I'm coming to. So you will find this sort of the graph where banking system has very poor customer experience, right? मतलब उससे खराब तो नहीं हो सकता है. But think about how much people work to get that shitty customer experience because the level of trust is so high. तो हम State Bank of India में जाके half day you will stand in a queue to get something done because your level of trust is so high that you are willing to deal with that customer experience, but you will not put that money into salt because you will worry whether I'll get my money back, right? So when you think of customer experience, of course there is a lot to do with customer experience per se, user experience per se, but there's also a lot to think about trust because customer will work very hard where the trust is high to go through that customer experience, and to shift them is the job that fintech will do. Payments, the reason I say payments is a great platform product is because payments does that very quickly. Like, very quickly you build that
In
trust.
fact, I would say, yeah, why we say we have, largest digital consumers in the country today, it is all because of the customer experience only, because, yeah, in payments. In fact, if you see success of UPI is mostly because of, consumer experience, it is a platform was always there, we had a lot of other products also, but why UPI has just grown so fast, and because it was all about customer experience. So it plays the, one of the key pillars and the biggest role in entire, payment transaction processing life cycle. And why India is growing, why digital businesses, I think, it's playing big role, very big role.
Hey, thanks. I'll do one last question, Shinjini, and I'll start with you because you've seen the policy side, the Paytm side, and a city side. Awareness of the consumer, right? How can you get the large ecosystem of India, which is, as we say, the Bharat, into doing digital payments? I know we've seen numbers that we can do 1 billion transactions and there are targets for 2025. How do you think we can get the larger fold of ecosystem into payments?
Very good question. If you ask me, I think that there is a tremendous ability that people at the lower end of the consumer spectrum have to take a product and use it for their own benefit, because it affects their lives, it solves real problems for them. So many of you know, I live in the mountains and I have a home which is almost a village home, but everybody there, from the plumber to the electrician, to everybody uses digital payment, because if they need money from me, they need to get it digitally. They can't wait for me to go there next time and give them cash. So everybody learned like super, super, super quick. And my favorite example is when you buy a dishwasher or a washing machine, it's so much easier to teach your help to use it than to teach your husband to use it. Because it solves a problem for that person. It doesn't solve a problem for your husband, right? So I think so all my super rich friends are the ones who are resistant to using digital payments, because for them there are all kinds of bogey ideas in their heads. But everybody who's at that end solves this super quick. And in fact, when I was in Paytm and demonetization happened, that was my biggest learning. How fast and how well you give them a good product and they know how to take it and make even your type of product, right? I'm sure you see this in all your businesses.
So India, I think consumers are, accepting, all the digital very well, and mostly because of user experience and the education. I think it has become simple. If you go to West, I've seen it is very difficult to make a transaction. The user experience is not that great. So in fact, why India is growing very fast, and we can see a lot of transactions here, and fintech. India has become the fintech capital of the world only because of these 4 or 5 factors where regulation is also there, which is trying to see that everything is falling in place together. Experience is there. All the ecosystem players are coming together. So a lot of convergence is happening, and this is why we are so successful here in India than in the West. This is what
I know we're hard pressed for time. I'll quickly add. I think first is build products for tier 3 to tier 6. I think that's where growth is going to come from. Think of the challenges those customers have. Intermittent internet connectivity. What are the things that can go wrong? Visualize it, go and solve for it. This cannot be a bigger problem for the Stanford graduates and the Harvard graduates that we recruit to go and solve. I don't know what else can motivate them. And finally, use the long tail distribution model. Finance minister talks about in the budget of using post offices to do distribution along with core banking tie-ups and digital banking units. I think those are good enablers. I think we've got the right foundation in place for this market. It's just as people who live in big cities, it's important for us to see that the next phase of growth is going to come from tier 3 and tier 6 and reorient ourselves, rewire ourselves to solve for those problems. Culture is the important thing. Again, I'll say that.
I think my final 2 cents, the way the banks and the other pieces, fintechs or even Paytms of the world operate, their template has to change. Right? They actually believe in offers, they actually believe in getting the numbers. It has to be a long-term, sustainable approach that they need to form, and I think rewards is one of those pieces, not the only piece, that should be adopted very well with these particular banks along with this. So the template changes, one. Second is they have to consider repeats as one of the important aspects and not go after new acquisitions. Look about us. For a SaaS company like yours, for a company like yours, a new business is more important than the one you already have. So that template change in terms of focusing on repeats, getting rewards into the overall ecosystem for a longer term vision is somewhat my 2 cents would be to change the template on the ecosystem.
you said about the distribution we should use. So, so Lyra is part of this postal department project where, Darpan project is there. So this is very interesting project. Nobody has seen this kind of scale. So in entire rural India, Department of Post has deployed 1,30,000 devices, and these devices, POS machines, are used to do a door-to-door banking service in the rural India, and connectivity was a big problem across India. So Lyra has played a key role, to enable connectivity for these devices across the country. So now, I will tell you, once these devices were deployed, the largest telecom company in the country said, boss, I will give you 10% commission. Please enable my recharge onto these devices in rural India. So once you have this distribution network for rural India, there are many companies who want to use this distribution network, and you can earn a lot of money. So now what has happened, these dakyas, branch postmasters. So now there is an incentive model also is coming up. They are also getting more revenues. So it's not about salary, but there are more departments try to give more innovative cash rewards to these people. So this is interesting, and a lot of people want to latch onto this distribution network.
Must have been a startup.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we've run out of time. I'll thank all of you and the panelists over here. In case any of you have questions, maybe can do it offline. Thank you very much, and thank you, the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pramod, for stepping in.
Thank you.